The African Union, once a loud critic of Burkina Faso's military-led government, has now made a surprise visit to Ouagadougou. Yes, the same AU that once condemned Ibrahim Traore and labeled his rise to power as illegitimate is now knocking at his door. This isn't diplomacy, this is panic, because the AES Alliance, the unshakable bond between Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, is flipping Africa's political order upside down. And now the AU, scrambling to stay relevant. Western powers, losing sleep, and the world, watching closely. Let's rewind. This is the same African Union that suspended Burkina Faso in 2022, threatening isolation and shaming its revolution. But now they've quietly dispatched Tete Antonio, their top envoy, on what they call a listening mission. Listening to what? The chants of millions shouting Africa for Africans as youth rise across the continent? Or the cold reality that the old power structures are crumbling fast? Make no mistake, this wasn't diplomacy, it was damage control. Because back in January 2025, the AES bloc officially broke away from ECOWAS, sending shockwaves across Africa. 3 small countries had just dismantled decades of Western-backed control, and the timing of the AU's visit says it all. As Nigeria scrambled to keep ECOWAS afloat with a high-profile summit, the AU rushed in from the sidelines, desperate to understand how they lost the narrative and the region. The mission? Figure out how they lost control. The truth? They already have. What the African Union discovered in Burkina Faso left them speechless. The AU delegation arrived with lofty words, talking about collective African paths and finding solutions together. But the moment they sat down with Captain Ibrahim Traore, they were forced to confront a truth they could no longer ignore. The future of Africa is no longer in their hands. To grasp the full weight of this moment, we have to rewind to September 2022, when a 34-year-old army captain named Traore stunned the continent by toppling Lieutenant Colonel Hendry Damiba, who had only recently seized power himself. But Traore wasn't just another soldier taking charge. He was channeling the fire of a fallen giant, Thomas Sankara, the revolutionary icon who renamed the country Burkina Faso, Land of the Upright People, and paid for his defiance of French colonialism with his life. Now, nearly 4 decades later, Traore has picked up the torch. Both men rejected foreign military domination. Both spoke directly to African youth. Both believed in true sovereignty, not handshakes with old empires. And now, as Burkina Faso completes the long-awaited Thomas Sankara Museum, designed by global star architect Francis Carré, it's clear that Traore isn't just honoring a legacy, he's finishing the mission. But here's the twist. Where Sankara stood alone, Traore has built an alliance. Alongside Assimi Goïta of Mali and Abdourahmane Chiani of Niger, he formed the AES Alliance, transforming 3 so-called failed states into a resource-rich powerhouse that's kicked out Western troops and reclaimed control over its own land. That's why the AU is panicking. For decades, they propped up leaders who handed over Africa's minerals, oil, and people to foreign interests. Now, a 34-year-old captain is showing the continent another path, and the people are following. While AU envoy Tete Antonio spoke of diplomacy, the numbers told a much louder story. Burkina Faso's economy is booming, averaging 6.4% growth annually. GDP is set to hit $22.7 billion by the end of 2025. It's on track to become the 20th largest economy in Africa. But this isn't just about GDP. This is about power, control, and dignity. Traore's government has nationalized its gold, built the first domestic gold refinery, created a national gold reserve, reclaimed 2 major mines, collected over 11 tons of gold in just 3 months. And when he announced a territory liberation deadline, promising to reclaim the final 30% of land held by insurgents, it wasn't just a military pledge, it was a declaration. Our problems will be solved by us, not by French boots on African soil. That's the message the African Union didn't expect. And it's the reason why the old order is trembling, why the African Union is panicking, and what they don't want you to see. The African Union's sudden charm offensive in Burkina Faso isn't about diplomacy, it's about survival. Because if the AES model works, if Traore's revolution proves sustainable, it will shatter decades of political compromise made by African leaders with modern-day colonial powers. That's the fear. If AES rises, it exposes the truth that African governments could have chosen sovereignty, but didn't, and that's exactly what's happening. While Western media paints Burkina Faso as a terrorist breeding ground, the reality is stunning. Under Traore's leadership, the country has launched 25 massive development projects, including tomato processing plants, a modernized international airport, and even plans for nuclear energy. Meanwhile, international allies are multiplying. In May 2025, Russia's defense minister met with Burkina Faso's top brass, pledging stronger military ties and calling the country a trusted ally. But that's not what really terrifies the old guard. On January 29, 2025, the AES Confederation introduced biometric passports, and Traore himself received the very first one. This wasn't just symbolic. It was a clear break from ECOWAS and its foreign-controlled systems. These new passports enable free movement of people, goods, and services across AES borders. No Western permissions, no colonial middlemen. Just African integration by Africans for Africans. And when the U.S. froze $312 million in USAID funding, hoping to punish Burkina Faso, it backfired spectacularly. Instead, activists across the region rallied behind Traore, pointing to the cut as proof of foreign sabotage. Even Nigeria's President Tinubu is feeling the heat, extending a desperate invitation to the AES bloc to return to ECOWAS, while watching his regional alliance lose over 50% of its territorial strength. But it's too late. A new African consciousness has emerged, and it isn't being shaped in conference rooms. It's being digitally weaponized by a generation that grew up online and refuses to be silenced. Traore isn't just leading troops, he's leading a movement. AES isn't some dusty regional coalition. It's a pan-African awakening built from the ground up, without begging donors, without selling land, without asking permission. Here's the irony. The African Union spent decades legitimizing puppet regimes that sold out their people. Now, it's knocking on the door of a 34-year-old revolutionary, asking for relevance. And social media? It's not noise anymore. It's the voice of a generation, shouting, "We want leaders like Traore. We want dignity. We want Africa for Africans." So now the question isn't whether Traore's revolution will succeed. The real question is, do we have the courage to demand the same from our own leaders?